Hey, what's up, guys? All right. It has been a while, Austin. Yeah, it's going well. We're actually about to record a episode that will come out Thursday, but I've started a new thing where I do a live stream, so people can ask questions while I'm interviewing. I won't be paying attention to the live stream when I start the interview at 5:30, but people can ask questions, and then I will ask them at the end. We'll do a little Q&A at the end from the comments section. It's actually about. All right. Cool. We will put that there. I wish I could put that further out of the way, but whatever. But yeah, so we are going to be launching. This is episode 3 of the 7 Vices and Their Opposing Virtues. So we're going to be interviewing with a guy named Dominic. His YouTube channel is the Logos Project. And so yeah, we'll show you guys a little bit of that. And yeah, we'll do Q&As at the very end. So where the poll below, it says, do you struggle with greed? I just threw out a random poll, but that poll is specifically for the episode we're talking about. So 7 Vices and Their Opposing Virtues. We're going to be talking about the 7 vices, the one vice from the 7 vices, which is greed. Every vice has like a counter to it, and the counter would be the virtue, which would be generosity. And so we're going to be talking about those 2 today, but also just a little bit about Dom. It's very conversational, so we'll just kind of start the episode and see where the Holy Spirit takes it. So drop where you're from, though, in the comments, and you guys can drop questions as we go. Obviously, I know people will be in and out. You guys can support this way by hitting this like up here so that we can hit that. Let's get that as high as we can. I think closest we've ever gotten to 20 is like 17, 16, maybe something like that. So hit the like button. Like I said, we'll be doing this. This is going to be about probably from now like an hour and 15-minute live stream. So you guys obviously if you go, feel free to come back and drop your questions. You may be able to come back. We'll be answering the questions at the end of the live stream. But yeah, so this is a new thing. We did this one time and people really liked it. So I thought we would do it again for this episode. See how you guys like it, and maybe continue to do some of this as well. So Ice 94, what's this about? So I have a podcast. That's kind of what I was just explaining. I have a podcast. I interview different people about the Catholic faith, and right now we're doing a series on the 7 Vices, Their Opposing Virtues. So I do a live stream. I'll be actually recording with my computer, my software, and everything. But I do a live stream during it so people can ask questions. So if they're listening, it gives people an opportunity to see what we're doing ahead of time. But you guys can also ask questions and stuff throughout while we are talking. If there's something we say or something that you guys want to ask a question about, you just drop it in the comments section, and then we will answer them at the end. So yeah. If you guys are wanting to know more about Christianity, there's a word, or Catholic faith or anything, join our Patreon. We have a free Patreon page you guys can join for free. Has tons of daily gospel reflections, so reading through the gospels of the day. We're doing some. I just did like a self-reflection today, something that just kind of was on my mind in my prayer life. But every now and then I'll drop some like Catholic trivia and stuff in there as well. But I think I'm gonna host some like game nights and stuff in there as well. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, we're going to be talking about greed and generosity today. It'll start in about, he should jump on in about 7 minutes, and then we'll usually record for anywhere from like 45 minutes to an hour. So I'm going to be back. Perfect, guys. So you can come in and out. Like I said, we'll be about an hour 15, so it'll be a while. Or we'll be on here for a while, not an hour 15 till we start. But yeah, so once we start, like I said, I'll kind of ignore the live stream once we start, but I'm going to make it to where you guys can hear him and then you guys can see me and hear me. So you better hear the whole conversation, the whole episode, and you guys can just chime in the live chat when you want. And if I see it kind of scrolling, I see it during it, I may chime over to it. But other than that, we'll go back to the live stream afterwards. So this is kind of the behind the scenes. That's why I should start naming it. Behind the scenes live stream of the Holy Happy Hour. But yeah, so free Patreon group. You guys join, support the channel. We are building the best online faith community. That's our goal. So make sure you join our Patreon account. Like I said, normally when you hear people mention Patreon, it's like, how much do I have to spend to join it? This one's absolutely free. There are options to support what we're doing here. Definitely don't have to, but you guys can join for free, and you guys can keep up with what we're doing and everything. So, yeah. Haley, if you join, my moderator, maybe you could send a reminder in that Discord page that we're going live. Let people know. What questions do you guys have before we start? You three or however many are here that are on. What are you guys up to today? What's up, guys? Hey, Mr. Lepanto, what's up, man? Like I said, we should be getting started here in about probably 10 minutes or so. You guys will hear everything. I'm gonna make sure everything's set up well. Make sure you guys can hear. I may count on some of you guys to let me know if you guys can hear Dom when he gets on. And then once we kind of confirm everything's good, then we will get started. Greed and generosity, what we're talking about today. Which is always kind of interesting, because like greed and generosity are pretty... We talked about sloth and faithfulness, which is the opposing virtue. And yeah, so it's greed and generosity is interesting because they seem kind of simple. So I'm really interested. I'm really excited to talk to Dom about it more and see his thoughts, and maybe there's a deeper understanding of it. We're going to get to know him as well a little bit, so you guys get to hear about Dom, the Logos Project. We'll even do a little shout out to his page and make sure we show you guys his page and everything too. So Dom is the GOAT. That's what I've heard. When I asked Haley, who is Hallelujah or Hallelujah on her page, I asked her who I should bring on for this, and she had mentioned him. And so I was like, yeah, sounds good. Let's see here. I'm gonna pull up his channel actually on here. The Logos Project. Hey, what's up, man? Yeah, let me see here. All right, try again.
Hey, Josh, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, can you hear me okay and everything?
Yeah, let me, quieter, but that might be my headset. Let me try to turn it up. Oh, yeah, I think it is my headset.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was kind of the same way. I had my computer all the way down, so.
Yeah, no, this is way better. Yeah, sorry. Okay.
Awesome. Well, sweet. Well, cool. So, yeah, we'll kick this off just like any normal show would. I just do my normal intro and everything. And when I edit it, okay, we will be side by side throughout the episode. But when I edit it, like during that intro and stuff, you won't be on the screen. And then when I go and then introduce you, I always like to start with the guests, like about the guests and stuff. And I try to make it as like kind of smooth and conversational as possible, because I mentioned, like, I really kind of was inspired by Pints of the Quiet. I just loved how it was just kind of like a sitting down and having a cigar with someone or coffee with someone, and so that was kind of the vibe. So I kind of go for it. So I always tell people, I'm like, don't think of it as an interview, like where I'm just asking you questions. If you had questions, like feel free to shoot them my way, or anything. It's really conversational. And we'll kind of slowly kind of get into the topic. This one's a specific series, so we'll probably get into it a little bit more. Sometimes we don't even actually, like, I have guests on, I don't even like discuss a topic, like a specific topic. We just kind of let the conversation go. But this one, since we're doing like a series, I'll kind of bring it up and we'll just dive into it. Yeah. And so so we'll kind of I like to focus on this one's kind of like I want it to be the most helpful as possible. So it's like kind of how can we define greed? Like what is greed? What are some different ways to look at it? Because greed's a little bit an easier one, kind of like with sloth or gluttony or something like that. It's a little bit more of a deeper definition of it. But and then if this is you struggling with it right now, like what can we do to like start growing in virtue and the virtue of generosity? And so we'll kind of just that's kind of the timeline of it all, I guess. But I always tell people, after my intro, the Holy Spirit becomes the host, and he will take the conversation where he wills it. So
how long have you been doing the channel?
So I started the channel in November, and I posted like 2 videos, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, and so I just stopped. This was November, not this past year, but the year before. And then it was really, I think March is when I first was like, okay, I know what I want to do. I want to do interviews, do all this stuff, and then it kind of merged into like I do my solo episodes as well, where I literally tell people, if you're looking for the deep theological answer, you came to the perfect place, because I can tell you about CatholicAnswers.com. My podcast would be called Catholic Questions, and I kind of do like just a more of my testimony through some of the Catholic teachings, and then kind of me discovering more and like studying more. And then I had a focus missionary come on as well, and she does some episodes as well, which has been a lot of fun, called Tell Me About Tara. So she's more of like a teacher. But we've been doing that now.
Are you in?
Do what?
Yeah. What state are you in, by the way?
I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was. Have you heard of Clear Creek Abbey?
Yeah. My wife's going out there next month for a little silent retreat with some girls.
That's awesome. I was a novice there for 2 years.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. So where are you at now? I guess I could save a lot of this conversation for the episode, but yeah, where are you at now?
Oh yeah. We could wait if you want.
Yeah. Actually, let's just do that. That'll make it even more natural. So, and then the other thing too, I have. I've tried this once and actually did pretty well. Is I have a live stream going too on my phone, and at the end I'll kind of flip through to see if there's any questions. And so sometimes people post a handful of questions. Sometimes they're related to the topic. Sometimes they're not even close. But it's sometimes fun to dive over there. And then what I'll do is I'll like kind of cut to that last, because then if there is nothing good over there, I'll just cut that part out. But
Sounds great.
Awesome. Well, I'm just gonna get it started, and I just do one take and everything, so it's just kind of a go with the flow type thing. So here we go. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Holy Happy Hour. I am your host, Josh, and first of all, it's been a minute between sickness and holidays and stuff like that. It's been a little bit, but we're back. We are going to be continuing our series on the 7 vices and their opposing virtues, which is perfect because Lent is coming up, and we're going to grow this right. Kind of goes through and overlaps with our Lenten series as well. So I'm super excited about that. Before we kind of jump into the episode and introduce our guests, I just wanted to remind you guys to hit that like and subscribe button. It's kind of the social media, the algorithm way of evangelizing, which is great. It sends the channel out to other people that also might like it. And then also don't forget to check out all of our links. You guys can join our newsletter. You guys can join our Patreon for free, which has a lot of daily gospel reflections, Catholic trivia, and different stuff like that. And we're working on providing even more content in there. But go ahead and join it now for free. You can use all those links in our bio. And then check out our sponsor as well, Sacrilegious. You guys use promo code HAPPY to get 10% off. But other than that, let's jump into the episode. So today, I actually have someone on the show. His name's Dom. So Dom, how's it going?
Hey Josh, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. And this is going to be great. This is going to be the most real first part of the segment, because sometimes I have like priests on or something from the Diocese of Tulsa, and I'm like, I know Father Castle, so I'm like, hey Father, like I know you, but tell everyone about yourself. But this time it was like, no, we were actually about to start talking, and we were about to start getting to know each other before we started, and we're like, no, let's just wait for the episode to start. So yeah, so like yeah, tell me about yourself. Like I know you said you had some experience actually here in Tulsa, but like where are you at now and kind of your story.
Yeah. Well, there's a long version and a short version. I'll try to give the short version. um, yeah. I let's see. I went to high school. I was in Kansas when I went to high school.
Okay.
I was with the fraternity St. Peter. And after that, I joined Our Lady of Clear Creek Monastery in Oklahoma, near where you live, about
Yeah.
an hour from Tulsa.
Hmm.
And I was a novice there for 2 years and absolutely loved it. You know,
Hmm.
it was literal heaven on earth.
Yeah.
But I quickly realized that the cloistered life wasn't for me. So I sadly I left,
Hmm.
and so I was a little bit lost for a while. And so I actually, to backtrack, I grew up in France. My dad is French, and I heard about Clear Creek because they're a daughter house from a French monastery, a French congregation.
Oh, okay.
And so after I left, I didn't know what to do, so I went back to France and I was teaching English for a while. And then I was thinking to myself, you know, this is not going to be a career. Like I need a direction basically. So my brother had just got out of the Marine Corps, so I said, you know what, screw it. I just went back to the United States. I joined the Marine Corps and I did 4 years.
Oh wow.
And so since then, I've been studying. After I got out of the Marine Corps, I started. Well, I worked for them still a little bit as a contractor, but I got I got my bachelor's at Holy Apostles College and Seminary in philosophy and theology.
Okay.
Then I got my master's in dogmatic theology. Same thing with Holy Apostles. And now I'm like in between the master's and the PhD, but they don't do the PhD at that school, so I just applied to the John Paul II Institute, and I just did the interview. Hear back from them in this upcoming month to see if I've accepted or not.
Oh, nice.
But in what I do on my spare time is basically these YouTube videos where I talk about a lot of the theologians that I like to read.
Yeah.
And you know, just you know the church's teaching and you know culture, faith, philosophy, things like that. And so I have a special focus on Joseph Ratzinger, who became Pope Benedict XVI. He's definitely a favorite of mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another one, a French Jesuit from the 20th century. He was born in 1886, I think, in 1890, if I remember correctly. This is father, and then he became Cardinal Henry de Lubac, pretty famous Jesuit in certain circles. So yeah, so that's basically
Nice.
kind of the short version.
Yeah. That's awesome, and that makes us completely different on the educational side. I like all the degrees and stuff. It's awesome. I just recently felt like I really had this conviction from God. Like it's like you have the passion to do ministry. You're willing to talk to people. You're willing to get out there, but I need you to like I want you to get get to know me more. Get the knowledge now.
Yeah.
Meet the passion, and then you'll be rocking and rolling. And so I actually converted 5 years ago, so I became Catholic in 2000.
I was going to ask you, what's your story into the church?
Yeah, so most people say that to sum it up, I converted and then jumped off the deep end into the Catholic faith. But I really the only experience I had with Catholicism was when I met my wife, and let's backtrack. I was in high school and I was a trumpet player. And the girl I was dating at the time went to St. Benedict's, this church out in Broken Arrow, and she was like, "Do you want to play Mass?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And it paid like $100, and I was like, "Sweet!" I'm rich, a rich high school kid. And I played, and I was like, I had been to churches. I grew up in a Baptist church, but it was kind of more of like a status quo going to Baptist church. My parents, because everyone in our small community went in West Tulsa, and so we just grew up. And when I got that invite to go to Mass or to go to play at St. Benedict's, I had no clue about anything in the Catholic faith at all. And so I literally went into it completely blinded and was like, this is the weirdest church I've ever been to in my life. And so that was kind of my only experience with it. Now, it became a music education and then eventually performance major, so I was a trumpet player. So actually my music history classes with Music History 1, literally, like, where did music start? It used to be just in the church, in the Catholic Church, and it was not even allowed outside. So I started learning actually the whole order of the Mass, but from a musical standpoint. So that was a little bit of an introduction. And then I kind of just college phase and got into my career afterwards and really didn't think much of it. But I always kind of had this thought of like, there's got to be more to all of this, like faith life stuff. And it wasn't until I met my wife who was like, you want to go to mass with me? And with my only experience, I really was like, oh gosh, I will. And I think I actually told her, it was either the first or second time, like, I'll go, but I'm not going to become Catholic. And we even had like conversations, like if we get married, what do we want to do with our kids? Like she's like, I'm going to take them to mass, but you can take them to your church too, I guess. And she was not very excited about it. But I met the right people and the right timing and met a great priest. And as soon as I met him, he's like, oh, you got to meet this guy. And he introduced me to the guy who ran the RCIA program. And when I met him, it was just kind of, he was cool. He invited me up to the church to hang out. And if you want to have any questions answered, but it's a fun time, we'll give you dinner. There's drinks and stuff. And ended up being RCIA, and so I went there and kind of got tricked into it. I was like, this is like a class. Like, what did I just walk into? And after that first class, it was the Order of the Mass and why the Order of the Mass. I was like, oh, I know this stuff, but from a music standpoint. So then when I sat through that class and he explained the Order of the Mass from a biblical standpoint, like why they do everything, where it's at in the Bible or where it's at in church tradition, all this stuff, I was like, what in the world? Like, this makes a lot of sense. So then I just went back out of curiosity, and it probably wasn't until 4 or 5 classes in that I was like, I really want to do this. Like, this is, I always thought it was so scripted. Everyone's always saying the same things. Everything's so scripted. The priest is even always reading from a book, reading his homily from a piece of paper. I'm like, it's not personal at all. And then the more I got to know the Catholic Church, I was like, no, it's extremely personal. Like, it's very reverent, and I just fell in love with it. Just fell in love with like realizing how worldly I'd become and how attached to worldly things, and yeah. So my wife introduced me, and then I got tricked into it. But that was good. The RCA director actually pulled me aside one time. I remember he said, "Now I do want to make sure you're not doing this for Lindsay, right?" And I said, "No, I mean, I don't think so." And he goes, "Okay, well, if you ever decide you want to do this, but you're only doing it for Lindsay, I'd rather you not do it." I was like, "Oh, interesting. Okay, so." And I don't know, something about that I really liked. And so he just wanted to make sure I was doing it for the right reasons. I had my right intentions. I really believed what I was confessing. And so, yeah. So it's been great. But then ever since then, we started up our own business. But like a year and a half in, I was like, we got to sell this thing. It's taking away from my faith life. And then I got the opportunity to work for the church. And so I literally sold my business. I went and I started working for the church. I do fundraising for the University Parish at TU, and then I started up this Catholic podcast. And people are like, "Dude, you like really jumped up off the deep end. Like, I lead a Bible study, just walk with some guys in discipleship, and it's just been a lot of fun." So
you've been fully brainwashed.
I know, right? Yeah, and it's so funny. And now, and this is probably where a little bit of that conviction came from. Is like when I do read like a comment section. I had just shared something today about like the church. The church came first, then the Bible, not the Bible. Like the Bible came from the church, not the church from the Bible. There we go. And so many people just like in my comment section, just like with such harsh beliefs about the Catholic Church, it's like made me really like sad and interested at the same time. I was like, man, like how are you guys thinking, or why are you guys thinking this way? And so it's I've come a long way in 5 years.
I lost you for a second there. I hope just like my internet's here. Let me real quick switch my internet.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Not a problem. All right, guys, we're getting a switch over on the internet,
Yeah,
and we will
be back. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good. No, I actually noticed it a little bit of the lag, but now I think you're good now. So, but yeah, so I've been doing this now on this podcast for probably whatever it's been 8 months, 7 months now, and it's kind of taken off, and it's been great. And so I've got to have a lot of great conversations with great people from all over the place. It's been super cool. So tell me about your YouTube channel, the Logos Project and stuff, and I'll include that link. So if you're watching this on my channel, you guys can find the link in the bio.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started. I think. Oh my goodness! I actually think it's been 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
We started as it was just a podcast. It was on, Apple Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
What else was it? Google Podcast.
Spotify.
Things like that.
Yeah.
And it was me and a Protestant friend of mine just talking about Scripture. So I
Oh,
was
okay.
the Catholic, he was the Protestant, and we were just talking about scripture. I was kind of sharing some of the things I was learning from books I was reading, and he was throwing ideas, back at me. Long story short is that so this was a good friend, and we were debating about Protestantism and Catholicism on the side,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like a 2 year long debate between him and I, and eventually he capitulated and became Catholic.
Nice.
Obviously, a lot of it was from the resources that he was investigating into.
Yeah.
I'm sure I played a part in it,
Mhm.
but it wasn't just me. But so
Mhm.
he became Catholic, and then what happened is that we switched to YouTube after like a year and a half into it, and then he got married and ran off, and so now it's just kind of like it's my baby, it's my YouTube channel, and so I use it to do all the all the videos and stuff and have guests on. And
Nice.
recently, I haven't had many guests on, unfortunately, but yeah, it's just called the Logos Project,
Nice.
and heavy focus on Pope Benedict XVI and
That's awesome.
Father Henry DeLuca.
Okay. Now is Benedict XVI who Benedictines are were founded by, or am I thinking somebody else?
Yeah, no, that was Saint Benedict of Nursia.
Oh, okay.
He founded
Yeah.
the Benedictine order in the early church.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
but that's why Pope Benedict. Took the name Benedict, is because
Gotcha.
it was
Gotcha.
through the work of the Benedictines that the church flourished in Europe.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of in a post-Christian world, and he wants a renewal of the church that's going to involve more radical decision for the gospel, right? Really to realize that the culture we live in is not just not Christian, it's anti-Christian.
Yeah.
So we really need a more radical response, and so that was why he chose the name, among other reasons.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah. I think as soon as I asked that too, I was like, wait, no, my son's name is literally Benedict, and my wife was the one that picked the patron saint form and stuff. I'm like, that was dumb. Okay, we'll erase that. No, I'm just kidding. Well, that's awesome. Well, thanks. Yeah, again, thanks for joining us. I'm excited to have someone on to help me dive even deeper, which is actually works out perfect with the joke I made earlier about you. You've been like the really heavily knowledge one, and I'm kind of growing in my knowledge. But yeah, we're doing a series on the 7 vices and their opposing virtues. I actually got this this kind of series idea from a talk from Seek 24, the Focus Missionaries conference they do every year, and Father Josh Johnson did this amazing talk. It was about 45 minutes, and he kind of went through all of them real quick, and I was like, it'd actually be kind of cool to do a single episode on each one, on the virtue or the vice and the opposing virtue. And so we had talked about one that I think that is going to hit home with a lot of people, and so with greed and generosity. And so I know a lot of us kind of understand the like what greed is, but to start this one, like I guess if someone was to be like, how do I know if I'm struggling with greed, or how do we I guess define like what greed is? Like what would you say?
Yeah. Well, before I logged on, I briefly grabbed real quick the catechism paragraph that mentions it, and it's basically greed really refers to the 10th commandment, right? So the commandments that God gives to Israel through Moses in the book of Exodus, they're repeated in the book of Deuteronomy, but the 10th commandment is specifically actually. I put it on a Word doc here. It basically reads, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male or female slave, or ox, or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. So that's the 10th commandment. So it uses the word to covet, right? And covet, one way maybe to kind of describe what that means would be to basically desire something with the intent to appropriate it, right? In a certain sense, an unjust desire, right? A desire that does not actually will the good of your neighbor, right? And so sometimes this kind of desire, of course, doesn't just become wishful thinking, but it's sometimes put into action when you steal things. So it's connected to theft, right? But also, we've all heard of the concept of hoarding, right?
Yeah.
Think of Scrooge McDuck.
Yeah.
Disney characters. Yeah, it's someone who really holds on to material things, and holds on to them tightly because he kind of his heart is really in material things. So
Yeah.
maybe to read what the Catechism says.
Yeah.
If I can. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Yeah, it's Catechism. This is paragraph 2536 or 2536. It says the 10th commandment forbids greed and the desire to amass earthly goods without limit. It forbids avarice arising from a passion for riches and their attendant power. It also forbids the desire to commit injustice by harming our neighbor in his temporal goods. And then the Catechism goes ahead and quotes from the Roman Catechism, which is just an older catechism. And here's the quote.
Yep.
When the law says you shall not covet, these words mean that we should banish our desires for whatever does not belong to us. Our thirst for another's goods is immense, infinite, never quenched. Thus it is written, quote, he who loves money never has money enough. End quote. So that's just two passages, right, that kind of further explain what I was trying to get at. So yeah, really it's just this disordered desire for temporal goods that belong to other people. Yeah. Right? So that we can have more, right?
Yeah.
And so if someone loves money in a disordered way, they never have enough money.
Yeah.
That's just an example.
Yeah, absolutely. We were part of a multi-level marketing company at one point, and everything was so big on like getting to the next level. You can make this much money, but then when you get there, you got to get to the next level and you make this much money. And it really did kind of seem like this endless, whatever. And that was kind of my first thing I was thinking when you were talking that is that this thought of like Jesus has to be enough. Like your faith life has to be the center, because I could say to myself, like, if I was only making $6,000 a month, like, I'd be sad. But if I focus on that, and that's really like what I think is what'll fill that void in my heart, I guess, or whatever, void in my life. When I hit 6,000, most likely I'm just gonna be like a couple months in, like, man, if I was only making $7,500 a month or $10,000 a month, it's never gonna go away. And so yeah, we had to get out of that company. Everything was so backwards. It was so focused on worldly things like wealth and building stuff. Now, granted, we did want to build wealth so that we could do great things, which I know that's a common misconception too, is people actually look at rich people poorly because it's like, you guys shouldn't have this much. Your house shouldn't be that big, or you shouldn't be vacationing to like the Caribbean twice a year or whatever. Which I don't know if that's, in my opinion, I think I've heard that that's not necessarily true. I think that you need to like spend your wealth. You need to steward your money well. But the Catholic Church needs wealthy people. Like we need, I mean, I do fundraising for a living. Like if there were no wealthy people, my job would be very hard.
Yeah. By the way, can you hear the fan in the back? I can go turn it off if it's a problem. Can you hear that?
No, I can't. I can't hear it. Can you hear the screaming kids in the other room? My kids were screaming in the other room just a second ago while you're talking. I was just like, I hope they can't hear that. But that's okay. That actually is perfect background noise for a Catholic podcast. It's just the two kids screaming in the other room. Yeah. But yeah, another thing I thought about too. Oh, go ahead. Because you're probably about to respond to what I said.
I was going to say, just that, you're right. It's not a condemnation. Condemning greed is not condemning possession, right? Mm-hmm. But it's condemning disordered possession. Mm-hmm. So if one possesses things in an ordered way, which means that he possesses them for a purpose, right, which is tied to his fellow man, then it's not really about some kind of calculation, like how much does someone have? But it's about the way in which you possess. But I would argue that when people do possess a lot, it's going to be a lot more difficult to have an ordered relationship to the amount that you possess, and so it does become, for the rich man, becomes more difficult to actually be detached from his possessions. And that's kind of what
Mhm.
Jesus says in the Gospels, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So again, it's not a condemnation of possession,
Yeah.
but it's a condemnation of um, the nature of our attachment to our possessions, right?
Yeah.
And it is much more difficult if you're more wealthy. Now,
Yeah.
you're right though. Some people need more things to reach certain ends that help, their fellow men, and so
Mhm.
that's why that's necessary as well. So that's kind of
Yeah.
the way I would approach it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've just recently brought on a business manager for this podcast, and we've set up everything, and she's like got these people that want to be great supporters and stuff. And so what the very first thing we did is kind of write up a little clause of like this is like how much money, like the percentage we want to go towards like the ministry, because our goal with this podcast is to use the platform to then bring on supporters that we can do things for the good for the people in need. We've got people that want to be part of this ministry that build decks, and so they said there was a time where a tree fell on an old lady's deck and it broke the side rail and stuff, and he went over there, helped her, fixed it up, and then she's like, how much do I owe you? He's like, nothing, don't worry about it. And he's like, I want to be able to do that more. I can't, but I want to be able to do that more. So I was talking to her and I was like, man, we need to make sure like that's our main thing, and it's been such a great fit because she's been like all on board. It's like, yeah, like we could bring in a lot of money with this thing one day, but we want to make sure that a lot of money is going into the community, like going to people that need it. You know.
You mentioned always wanting more,
Mhm.
right? Raising the goal, you might say, of how much we want to make.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you see this in general. I know personally, I see it in my life, which is that there's never enough of things. When you have a desire for something and you
Mhm.
get it, it's not like you've made it. Like you
Yeah.
always want more eventually.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think this points to something about human desire, unlike animal desire, right? Animals, when they are satisfied, they're satisfied. They're content.
Yeah.
They're not restless like we are. And
Yeah.
there's that famous line from St. Augustine, right? That we're restless until we rest in God,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Although he's, in Augustine, it's, he's praying, so we're rest. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. You disappeared for just a second, but you're good.
Okay. So what I'm trying to say is that it points to the fact that the longing of the rational animal, right, of the human being, right, is a different, qualitatively different from other creatures, because he desires something that goes beyond what's available in the natural world, right?
Mhm.
In other words, he desires supernatural, right? Something that comes from God, infinite.
Hmm.
And so it's precisely because our desire for something that goes beyond this world,
Yeah.
that the things of this world don't satisfy us, and that when we make them into our ends,
Hmm.
then we become restless, always want more and more and more. And this is the origin story of addictions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it seems to me, greed, in fact, is it's actually a sign that you're made for God, right? That human beings are in the way they are,
Yeah.
and it reaches levels of destruction that's not possible for animals, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing about human beings. Because rational animals, they can do worse things than animals.
Yeah.
Right?
That is
But
true.
it also means that for something much more lofty and noble than animals.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think greed, and then I'm sure we'll talk about generosity.
Yeah, yeah.
But greed really shows something about human nature itself, this restlessness,
Hmm.
and the fact that our end and what we truly desire from the depths of our nature
Hmm.
is something that is not of this world, something radically transcendent, right? Something
Yeah.
infinite, right?
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis talks a lot about this too.
Hmm.
That we desire, God. It's kind of his argument from desire as a proof for God's existence. But anyway, but that's a tangent. So
No, yeah,
that's
yeah,
what
you-
you said reminded me of the
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree with all that. Yeah, and I think too to myself, like if someone's listening and they're like, oh well, thank goodness I don't have a lot of money. It's like, man, money isn't the only thing that can cause greed. But I even think about some of the people who like want to portray like they have money. I don't even know if that would be maybe we'd be getting into a different vice at that point. It's more Pride, or so I don't know. I know Pride's the root of all this, and that was the very first one I started with, was Pride with a priest, and he was just talking about how it's like just the root of all of them. It's like when Pride comes in, they really, it's the domino that starts it all, and it can just lead to everything. And I'm kind of seeing that in like the conversation we're having. It's just like the greed can really just easily stem from that. And then I can also see greed maybe also being another one where it's like, man, as soon as you start getting greedy, you then also can start being envious of others and jealous of others and get angry at others because they have things you want. And man, that's a tough. This will be a tough one if someone was living like this. I know it used to be me. That, and probably still a little bit because I'm not perfect, but this would be a tough one in today's society. So like today's society is just really big on just more and more and more, like wealth, like what you have. And even when it comes to like social media following, it's like if you can have social media, but it's like you only have 1,000 followers. Like, wow, like that's crazy. It's really interesting.
Yeah. You brought up the how there's a similarity between pride and greed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the opposite of pride is humility, and the opposite of greed is generosity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's also a similarity between humility and generosity. But just to begin with the similarity between pride and greed, pride, of course, is this attempt to be self-sufficient, this attempt to be like God, right?
Yeah.
To be the center of the universe, you might say.
Yeah.
And so, really, what stands in the center of pride is the self.
Mm-hmm.
But it's literally the exact same thing with greed, right?
Mm-hmm.
With greed is that you want to take from others things for yourself.
Yeah.
Right? You want to be self-sufficient. You want to be powerful. You want to be secure.
Yeah.
There's a lack of trust in God and a lack of acceptance of the fact that we're not God, that we're created, and that we depend upon something other than ourselves.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's pride and greed are definitely connected. Like you said, pride is the root of it, right?
Yeah.
But greed is really this. You kind of become the center of everything, like a magnet, like a black hole.
Yeah.
Like swallowing everything and hurting everyone in the process.
Yeah.
And but I mean, if the opposite of that is generosity, well, then there has to be a link between humility and generosity. And I think there is. But I think we'll be able to talk about that maybe going forward. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, before we get into that, one other thing I was thinking of is this. I was having this great conversation with our catechist, and we were talking about this mechanic that was looking at his car before he found a friend, luckily, at his parish that works on cars. But he's looking at his car, and he was going to charge him, it was like, whatever, $5,000 for this fix. And then he was thinking about it. That's a huge fix. And then he went to his parish and thought, hey, have you met this person? And he's like, what do you do? And he's like, I'm a mechanic. And he's like, oh, that's awesome. Like, you want to look at my car? Like, I'm having these troubles. And the guy was like, yeah, I can definitely do that for you if you want. If you order this part, whatever, it'd be about a $1,500 fix. And then he asked the guy, he's like, hey, I got quoted like $5,000 for this. And he's like, yeah. He's like, mechanics will do that. It's like, so it's that job that if you can't do it yourself, then you got to pay. Like, then I can charge you more. And we started talking about this. Like, that's just kind of how society, I feel like, is nowadays. It's like, if you can't do it yourself, then, which kind of leads right into generosity. It's like, we should be thinking the opposite way. And that's what we want to do here at the Holy Happy Hour. Our overall ministry is called the Cabrini Collective. And we really want to just be that outpouring of love into the community of like we want to be able to, for every $30 a month that someone supports, we could do an oil change for someone like every month, and doing stuff for people, like just to kind of ease that burden, because there is times where it's like you can't cut your own hair. If you want it to look good, you're going to pay a lot of money, especially if you're a woman. You're going to pay a lot of money for it because it's a skill and a talent, a trade that someone has that they're just going to charge out the wazoo. Photographers, it's another one that's like so much money for. It's just I don't know. I feel like that starts falling into what we were talking about earlier about just the more you have, the more it just gets dangerous to kind of find that order still. Like, I know you have to make a living, but still it's like finding that order. But yeah, it was an interesting conversation just about I forget the word he brought up, but he brought up this kind of like oh man, I'm running blank what it was. But yeah, he said, I think some pope or something actually put out a writing or something, something similar to this. I can't remember exactly what it is, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Pope talks a lot about the consumerist mentality of
Yeah.
our society, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything is a good to be consumed,
Yeah.
right? Everything is a product, and so yeah, I mean that definitely objectifies people. It kind of takes the dignity out of labor.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a product of the kind of liberal economy that we have since the Industrial Revolution,
Yeah.
and it's definitely something that divides people, ironically, which is
Mm-hmm.
this kind of global economy, which is meant to bring nations together, internally divides people because of greed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you're right; it's generosity that brings people together,
Yeah.
right? It's actually helping out your neighbor with an oil change for no fee, just because we're neighbors and because living together is a good thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what actually brings about peace. It's sometimes this kind of liberal economy that brings about unrest and discontent.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think, community help is so important, and that's what the church can provide.
Yeah.
Something that you might say the kind of larger economy can't, right?
Yeah.
And what the church can provide is spaces like that of generosity
Yeah.
that keeps people sane, and
Yeah.
human.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah. And one thing I was going to ask too before we move on to kind of talk more on the like practicals of like if someone's listening and they're like, "This is me. How can I get better?" Is there any other way you could think of? Because obviously, when I think of greed, the first thing I think of is money. Like money, obviously, is the number one thing. Is there another like example you could think of maybe to help people even get a better understanding? Because they may be thinking like, "Well, I don't really care for money or whatever," but you could maybe show greed in a different way.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, greed does usually have to do with things that other people have.
Mm-hmm.
So money or a car, a house, if you're a kid, a toy.
Mm-hmm.
It usually has to do with material goods that people possess, and greed has to do with our sort of desire towards those, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you could talk about a greedy attitude, right? That can show up in relationships, right? You're emotionally greedy. Right?
Yeah.
There's even a kind of greedy attitude towards God. Like you could be spiritually greedy in a way that's spiritually detrimental.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just, of course, greed is inseparable again from lust. I mean, lust ultimately is a form of greed where you treat others as an object that you want to possess for yourself,
Yeah.
as opposed to loving them as a person
Mm-hmm.
who isn't yourself that deserves your respect.
Yeah.
So it's, again, you're right that these vices are hard to separate.
Yeah.
They're but greed would be a kind of lust for material things.
Mm-hmm.
Lust would be the degradation of human persons. That's why they're distinct, and that's an important distinction. I'm not trying to confuse
Gotcha.
them, but
Yeah.
you see that if you understand like the logic of greed, it's really the logic of all the vices. Really,
Yeah.
it's the self at the center. It's that pride.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say that it specifically has to do with material things,
Gotcha.
including money.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So, yeah. So I like to always move into kind of the last segment before we get into any like the Q&As and stuff. Which anyone watching on the channel like later, like if this is Thursday, we have a live stream going. So you guys in the live stream, you guys can ask questions. So I know we have a couple already, but yeah, so moving into like the generosity side. So someone's listening, they're like, man, this is me. Like, I feel like this is hitting home with me. So what can I do? Like, what do I do? And obviously, neither one of us being priests, I always suggest spiritual direction is the number one thing you could do. But just from like a lay person's advice, like what would you like where would you start with someone? It's like, okay, you're struggling with greed. This is where I would start.
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, generosity, right?
Mm-hmm.
The opposite of greed.
Yeah.
It's one of, if people want to know, it's actually one of the 12 fruits of the Spirit that St. Paul lists in his letter to the Galatians. Actually, I think it's worth listing them very briefly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Galatians 5.
Yeah.
Here are the 12 fruits. He says, charity, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, generosity, gentleness, faithfulness, modesty, self-control, chastity. So one of these 12, of course, generosity. So I guess, kind of like defining what it is and then saying, well, how can we actually be more generous and less greedy in our everyday life?
Yeah.
I think it's good to turn to the best example of generosity, which obviously is God.
Yeah, yeah.
But how do we know that God is generous? And this is where we come to know how and who God is through Jesus Christ, who is the revelation of God, the Father, in history among us.
Yeah.
And honestly, the first text that came to mind when I was thinking about generosity was the famous Christ hymn from the letter to the Philippians. It's chapter 2. It's a poem, it's a hymn that St. Paul reads or writes, right? It seems to be something that predates Paul. He's quoting it, it seems like. But would you want me to read it? It's very beautiful hymn.
Yeah, go for it.
So here's how it goes. This is in Philippians chapter 2. It's the whole hymn is 6 through 11, but St. Paul writes, Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be grasped at, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness, and being found in human form. He humbled, there's the humility, humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore God also highly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name, and that he continues. But my point here is that what's being contrasted here is grasping versus emptying, right? The pride to be like God versus the humility to be like a slave, a servant. And so the paradox here is that in Christ, who is God, he doesn't actually grasp at divinity like the first Adam does, but rather empties himself of his divinity by becoming man. Obviously, he still is God, but in a certain sense, he divests himself of the glory of his divinity and veils it in the lowliness of his humanity.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's a humility there. And I mean, it speaks of a deeper humility in God, where the Father, in a certain sense, gives himself completely. The Father empties himself completely into the Son. And this is the basis for the generation of the Son, who receives himself completely from the Father. And so in the incarnation, what we see is that God becoming man, not just that, but becoming man who dies for us on a cross. You have this humility of God, which kind of reveals to us the inner nature of the Trinity. And so it's contrasted to the idea of grasping at divinity that we see with Adam. Anyway, I'm bringing all this up is because the Philippians 2 is, I think, the perfect example of generosity, because Christ gives of himself to all men. He says, this is my body given for you, right? And so he radically distributes himself to others, right? And that generosity is precisely, right, in a certain sense, what reveals God.
Yeah.
So what's beautiful about this is there's a passage in the document Gaudium et Spes from the Second Vatican Council, it's paragraph 24, and this is really the ultimate definition of generosity. It says, well, it's not a definition of generosity, but it comments on it. It says, man cannot fully find himself except through a sincere gift of himself. I mean, there's so many passages in the New Testament that speak of losing your life in order to find it or keep it, right? The last shall be first. There's this emptying movement that ends up as a glorification, just like we read in the hymn here.
Yeah.
So, basically, the question becomes, okay, Don, well, that's really nice and good, right? Being generous is giving myself. Well, like, how do I do that? Like, how am I to be Christ-like?
Yeah.
The first thing that comes to mind, it seems to me, is that devotion to the Eucharist is the first thing that comes to my mind. Why? Well, because in the Eucharist, you have God giving himself, he's being generous, to all of us as food, right? To build us up through his death, which becomes a source of our life on the altar. And so basically being devoted to Christ in the Eucharist, right, is allowing Christ to change us into his body through communion. And when we become like Christ through communion, then we become generous. So a devotion to the Eucharist, which isn't just receiving communion on at Mass, but also in adoration, right, where we behold in front of us the mystery of God's generosity. We kind of allow it to wash over us and to change us so that we might become like the bread given for the many when we leave adoration. And so, and also like the whole idea of, receiving God in his insane act of generosity, the only answer is gratitude. So being grateful. So sometimes thinking about all the things you're grateful for actually disposes you to be just as generous as the one to whom you're grateful, right? Because he gave us all, even our own, very being. And so I think this should ultimately translate from devotion to the Eucharist, right? Into serving others in particular ways. So basically the corporal works of mercy, the spiritual works of mercy, right? So it really, understanding better what the Eucharist is and being devoted to it, receiving communion, and adoration as well, and then being in contact with the mystery of God's generosity enables you, after Mass, to translate that mysterious contact into actions in the world. Right? So if you want to get over greed, be more devoted to the Eucharist, right? And then try to live in a Eucharistic way Monday through Saturday. Or else the Sunday Eucharistic moment becomes meaningless for you. But sorry, that was a tangent.
No, that was awesome.
Kind of like what I was thinking about.
And I love that you started with like going yourself and consuming the Eucharist, because I was just recently in a meeting and someone was like, what do you think it means to be like a missionary? And so I went off of my first thought was what Focus says is to win, build, send, is like you win people over, meaning you reveal who Jesus Christ is to them, and they're like, oh wow, I understand this, I know this, and specifically also Jesus Christ within the Eucharist and the Catholic Church. And then you build them up in the knowledge, and you prepare them to be a missionary, and then you send them. And he goes, that's great, you just missed one thing. And I was like, what do you mean I missed one thing? And he goes, what do you do before you do all that? And it's like, you have to be one, you have to build yourself, and then you have to go. And so I was like, oh, that's kind of a cool. So win, build, send is Focus this thing. So I was like, I guess you could elaborate that. It's like, you got to be one, build yourself, go, and then you can win, build, and send others. And so I think a lot of the times, like, we can jump right into, like, someone right now could leave this episode and say, you know what, I'm gonna go volunteer at Catholic Charities today, and they leave and they go and volunteer. That's great, and that's awesome, but you got to be in that right state of mind. You got to be in that right place with God in your own prayer life. And
no, that's an excellent point. There's a saying in the Middle Ages that was often repeated, which is agere sequitur esse. It's a Latin phrase that basically just means action flows from being. So, it's easy to get up and be like a busybody, like Martha in the Gospel, right? But there's one of the Psalms that says, in vain, they build, those who build the city, unless God builds it. I think it's Psalm 137 or something. Until we get our being right, which is contact with the being of Christ, which is the generosity of God incarnate. Until we get that right, what we do won't have the depth it needs, and it won't be effective in changing the world. So we have to really start with that time with the Eucharist in order to be fruitful in action throughout the week. If we don't do that, we flip things around, and it's not going to be fruitful.
And I feel like it's just like if someone's going to run a marathon and they're like, but they're not drinking water like 24 hours before, it's like that's not going to go well. Like you're not going to you're not gonna make it. You're gonna start cramping up real bad, and it's gonna be really, really rough.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, and I feel like that's exactly what it ends up being. Is like you just become worn down. Working on a college campus and working with missionaries, you sometimes see it. You can just see it in their face. They're so beat up and so worn down. Which they do have long schedules. I mean, they're working a lot, like late nights and mornings, and doing their holy hours and daily mass every day. But you can usually tell when someone's like, man, I got to kind of get back on track, because they're just like burnt out. And it doesn't have to be just a missionary; it can be any of us. I know I get that same way. My best friend here in Tulsa can usually tell like when my prayer life's a little suffering, because I talk so much. I'm high energy, and I can just be real mellow sometimes. And that's usually when I'm being mellow. It's usually just because I feel off and just feel interesting. And I think it's just when life gets disordered and it just gets kind of out of whack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, generosity is one of those things too. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, there's a little bit of a lag. Sorry about that. So if I cut you off, it's not on purpose. But no, there's generosity. I mean, if you look at the word itself, right? I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is generation, right? Or generating.
Yeah.
I mean, we also get the word Genesis, which it's tied to the concept of giving life. Right? But also Genesis, reminds us of the idea of the beginning of an origin.
Yeah.
So it's an origin from which life comes. But life is always a gift. It's given to us. We don't do something before our conception to earn life, right?
Yeah.
And so it's in a certain sense, generosity always implies a giver, a recipient, and the gift, right?
Yeah.
In other words, it always implies a communion, a relationship, right? Which is, in fact, a triune relationship. So generosity reveals something to us about God as love, God as the source of life, God as gift, God as Trinity, and that's exactly what the mystery of the Incarnation is all about. In the Son is revealed the Father and the unity of Father and Son, and that unity is what we call the Holy Spirit, right?
Yeah.
And so in the Son is revealed the Trinity, that God is love, that God is generous, and also what's revealed in the Son. This is another passage I wanted to read from Gaudium et Spes.
Yeah.
What's revealed in the Son is man, right? He is the last Adam.
Yeah.
And so there's this passage from Gaudium et Spes 22, which reads, "The truth is that only in the mystery of the incarnate Word does the mystery of man take on light," which is a beautiful saying, but only in Christ really understand what it means to be human beings, right? In other words, we're the result of the pure generosity of God, and we're meant for this relationship, this reciprocity with God, right? We're meant to enter into God's inner Trinitarian life. I mean, this is insane. I mean, this is completely crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's just there's something about greed that is destructive and unhealthy, and we all experience it to a certain degrees. But interestingly enough, is if you think about greed long enough, you see how it's the inverse of everything that God wants, of who God is, of who Christ is, and what I'm called to do and to be. And it reveals also that the vocation of mankind. Again, we talked about the fact that his desires for something that is other than what we find in this world. It transcends this world.
Yeah.
It's meant for life itself, in a certain sense, the communion of love that God is.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep lecturing, but there's this beautiful passage from Pope Benedict. Is it okay if I read it and then I'll shut up? I promise.
No, you're good. I love it. Yeah, go for it.
So, okay, I just had to bring this up. I was thinking before we did this, what could I draw from to understand generosity better?
Yeah.
And it reminded me of greed is this desire that's unquenched, right? We can't satisfy our desire, and so we end up in a destructive way, ruining ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And so, but what is it that we really desire, and how do we understand generosity in light of that. Anyway, so Pope Benedict, this is from his encyclical Spe Salvi, which means in hope we are saved. Here's what he says. He says, there is a contradiction in our attitude, which points to an inner contradiction in our very existence. On the one hand, we do not want to die. Above all, those who love us do not want us to die. Yet on the other hand, neither do we want to continue living indefinitely, nor was the earth created with that in view. So what do we really want? Our paradoxical attitude gives rise to a deeper question. What, in fact, is life? He says, there are moments when it suddenly seems clear to us, yes, this is what true life is. This is what it should be like. What we call life in our everyday language is not real life at all. Ultimately, we want only one thing, the blessed life, the life which is simply life, simply happiness. And looking more closely, we actually have no idea what we ultimately desire, what we would really like. We don't know this reality at all. Even in those moments when we think, reach out and touch it, it eludes us. All we know is that it is not this. It's not things in this world.
Yeah.
Yet not know must exist. Oh,
Something stopped, but I think we're good. Cool.
the what now? We're good?
I think we're good still. Maybe. It says yours may have stopped recording.
Yeah.
It says yours might have stopped recording for some reason.
I'm gonna click refresh.
Okay, yeah, do that real fast. Hey, and you guys that are watching, feel free to ask questions. If we can't get this back up, then we will answer the questions at the end. We've already got one great one, but yeah, enter it in. All right, cool. It says it's recording. We're good. I just saw recently Trent Horn said, guys, if you pray for me, I feel like I'm being attacked spiritually through technology.
Yeah.
I just had a camera go out on me. I just did an awesome debate with Alex O'Connor where the mics sounded like crap. And it's so funny. I was like, that's us right now. We're being attacked. No, that was beautiful. And I love that too because if it did cut out and we don't get that part, just talking about how everything of this world, like the tangible things we think we know what we want in this life, we don't actually know what, or it's not actually there. And I just think about like kind of what we said earlier with the money. Like if I only made $5,000 a month, I'd be happy. It's like, if I only made $10,000 a month, I'd be happy. It kind of is the same with everything worldly. I mean, if I only had a nicer car, if I only had, maybe if I had, if I got one promotion and I was the boss or whatever, there's everything in this world. We're always trying to fill this God-shaped hole with like these little worldly pieces, and it's never gonna work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why I read that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's why I read that, because he shows the fact that we really desire something more.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is. And so when we settle for things that are in this world, they don't satisfy us, and we end up destroying ourselves, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, what we really desire is not, a continuation of this life, which he says is, in a certain sense, not really living. There's moments when in our life we say, aha, that's life, that's living, that moment right there, that's happiness.
Yeah.
Right? You take glimpses of it. It's moments of transcendence that kind of, in a certain sense, make us burst out of this world into something supernatural, something spiritual.
Yeah.
And so if we're tuned to that, then we realize that the way to satisfy our hearts, the way to burst out of the world of things, right, into the world of God, is precisely through the sincere gift of self. That's what I quoted Gaudium et Spes. That's the way out of greed into the generosity of God. Because he pierced the ceiling first. He came down to meet us so that we might, in his mystery, in his body, go back up through the ceiling to God, So anyway, the whole faith is kind of summarizing this idea of generosity.
Yeah, it really is. which is so awesome. It's so great. And I feel like the algorithm today on YouTube when I got on, it was God worked it a little bit. I came across this guy that I subscribe to, and I love him. I'm going to include him in the comments just because it's awesome. It's literally not a Catholic person or Catholic podcaster. It's literally a Pokemon collector, Pokemon card collector. His name Coops Collection, and he has grown this massive following because of how generous he is. He's such a wonderfully awesome person. He goes to these Pokemon card trading shows and everything, and he sets up, and when these kids come up, he's like just so friendly with it. Really people in general, but especially the kids. And he always has like binders where he's like, you can take anything there for free. Like, go ahead. And if anyone's ever like starting their collection, he's like, hey, you see this graded card? Like, it's yours, whatever. And what's beautiful about generosity is I feel like or not feel like when you do it, it's like contagious. Like when you're generous to other people, like it can spread, and other people start to be generous. And he started live streaming these shows he's at, and I've seen him be with like kids, and they want to buy this card, and he's working on the price and what it should be. It's gonna be $100 for this nice card or whatever. But then all of a sudden his assistant's coming by and showing him the stream, and he's like, oh, it looks like someone on my stream bought this card for you. And it's like now they got people online that maybe don't even know him personally, but they're being generous, and they're putting stuff forward just to make somebody's day. And I was like, that is so awesome. Like, it's so cool. And I can literally sit there and like watch him interact with people like for hours. Unfortunately, I can't. I shouldn't, but I do sometimes. It's just so beautiful, and I feel like that's how like I feel like we're kind of becoming or not kind of. I guess society has kind of become an ungenerous and selfish society. And it's so beautiful to be part of the Catholic Church that is just, I mean, one of the most generous organizations out there. And where I work at doing fundraising and stuff, it's awesome to see, but then you also see some of the stats and stuff as well. Like doing fundraising right now, I mean, in 1994, there was like 78% of people gave to some sort of charitable organization. Didn't necessarily have to be a Christian or Catholic organization, just any charitable organization. But now we're like 2024, when the study was done again, it's like flipped, like vice versa. It's like 22% of people actually give. And it's very interesting. And it doesn't always have to be with your money. Time, talent, and treasure is what we're called to give with. But it's so interesting that everything's going kind of the opposite way. And it's beautiful to be part of the Catholic Church, who continues to kind of be the front runner for like generosity. Like, you can just tell it's just a beautiful church to be a part of, and it's been amazing.
No, but you're right. I mean, we live in a very greedy, materialistic society, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so to be a true follower of Christ, I'm just going to ask a kind of radicality that I don't think enough, we don't realize enough sometimes.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's definitely going to cause some soul searching. Like, you know, how am I living that's like the world, you know, in my everyday life? You know, do I just live like another person in the world and then just go to mass on Sunday? You know, is my Christianity like something added to my otherwise pagan life?
Yeah.
So this is where, you know, greed and generosity become really relevant in our everyday lives as Christians in a world that's become very greedy and very, you know, materialistic. And so we can't live like that. That's going to ask some sacrifices. Yeah. That I don't know if we've really thought that through long and hard enough. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I've always heard is, and kind of as we're kind of coming to a close here, is like kind of ending with some advice for people that, or some like last advice for people. And mine is with this topic has always been like finding those little ways to, and I can't remember who like has said it this way, or maybe it's just a common thing, but so find those little ways to die to yourself each day. Like finding each way to like sacrifice for those around you. And I feel like you really see it when you have kids, you start to really see what it means, like sacrifice for others. I mean, you find maybe even like you should feel when you get married, you finally have that person in your life, like it's like, I would die for you. But especially with kids, like you just feel like, just like God, like you were mentioning, just giving part of him to others. I mean, I would do that if I had to. I would do it physically if I had to for my kids. But what maybe some to finish it, wrap it up, and then we have a couple of questions over here. But we'll wrap it up. What's some like last advice you'd give to someone that's like struggling with this, but they're like, yeah, you know what, today I wanna start making a change.
think we underestimate and sometimes just straight up forget how um, how how much a compliment actually can do for other people. Right, saying something nice to someone else, you'd be surprised how that can change someone's entire day.
Yeah.
So if you get into the habit of occasionally saying even just a very small thing, right? Saying nice thing, complimenting someone about what they're wearing, what they did, what they said, how they sung at mass or something. A little compliment, I think, is a good way of being generous. You know? So
yeah,
that's one thing
absolutely. And I used to hear my sales days of even in the sales world. It's like the number one thing that people like to have said to them is their own name. Is like a lot of people aren't used to that. Like, and so we have this coffee shop. We'll meet there tomorrow morning for discipleship in our little small group. And anytime we go there and there's a new person working, we go out of our way to be like, hey, what's your name? Like, I know everybody else. Like, what's your name? And so we try to know those people by name. So when we show up to Summer Moon and we know Jackie and Rain and JT and Chloe and all the people working, which is super cool. And I feel like that's one of those things that can open doors. Like when you're that generous for others, and then people want to know, like, why are you so joyful and happy all the time? It's like if you can get yourself in that mindset, it's like that's then that perfect opportunity to then share the gospel with someone, to introduce them to Jesus or introduce them to the Catholic Church. And I think it all stems from that. You can be generous to anybody, even the hardest of core atheist person would still appreciate generosity. And so I think it starts there, and then entry level. So
for sure. Yeah, no,
well,
absolutely.
well, awesome. Well,
God reached us right by being generous.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, there's one question over here. I thought there were two, but there's one. The other one's kind of a troll question, so I won't ask that one. A guy, Mr. Lepanto, normally he joins the live chat a lot. He's in our Catholic Discord group. He said Dom frequently has book recommendations. Can you ask if he has any book recommendations on the 7 deadly sins / virtues?
I can't think of a book specifically on that.
Yeah, I was just say I can.
Let me see if I can find something similar.
Similar.
To that.
I'm gonna look something up too while you're doing that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to punt. I can't.
No, you're
think of
good.
a book specifically on this. Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Lepanto.
He's gonna be like, well, he's not known as giving good book recommendations anymore. I'm just kidding. I mean, I see some on Tan Books, and this is not necessarily a recommendation because I have not read it at all. But the Tan Books has a book called The Battle of the Virtues and Vices. Let's see. And I know Tan Books from being at Seek, and every time you walk past them, they're just shoving books in your hands. The Battle of the Virtues and Vices, Defending the Interior Castle of the Soul. Author, Pope St. Leo the Fourth. So, yeah. Maybe, like I said, not necessarily a recommendation, but it might, if it's written by did I say saint, or did I say, what did I say? Pope St. Leo, Pope St. Leo. If it's written by a saint, then you're probably safe to read that. But, maybe check that out, Mr. Lepanto. But, yeah, Dom, thanks for being on. Like, I'd love to have you on again, and we're going to sign off here. You guys don't forget to like and subscribe, and be sure to keep checking out to hit, if you hit that alert bell, you'll be alerted when we upload the next one, which will be the 4th episode of the 7 Vices and Virtues coming up, which are kind of a toss-up right now which one's going to be there, so I won't say which one it is yet, but we're going to be going through all of them. And Lent is also coming up, so make sure you join our Patreon group as well, because we're going to be uploading all sorts of great stuff during Lent as well. And again, it's free. You have the option to support, but don't feel obligated. Join it. It's a great community. Other than that, we'll see you guys next week, and God bless.
Thanks, Josh.
No problem. If you can stay on just a second, because sometimes it'll take a second to load, I think. I'm hoping that it does. It could possibly turn into a little bit of a project, kind of piecing it together, because I think it's going to break it up into a couple different uploads, but that's okay. It actually should do.
I don't know what caused it.
Yeah, I don't know either. That was interesting, but sometimes it's just. It could honestly be Riverside Studios. I may look at switching. It's been very great.
I'll tell you what, I use StreamYard, and it's
Okay.
fantastic for live streams.
Nice.
Like,
Okay.
the streaming, because I used Riverside like a few years ago,
Uh-huh.
and it works for some people because of what they do, but for
Yeah.
me, it really didn't work. But
Yeah.
StreamYard has been amazing for me.
Yeah, this one's been interesting. It's felt like it's been pretty good, and I think mainly it's really easy to use, and I don't necessarily do a lot of live stream like
Also,
this.
if you want me to keep my tab open for like the next several hours, because I know sometimes that's needed for
Yeah, my
for files, I can do that. So.